Cole. She was raised in Cooper Hill. She now lives around Bland. And she is the senior editor of Mules and More magazine. She's been in that position since 1980. And she also was very instrumental in getting the Missouri legislature to pronounce the Missouri mule as the official Missouri state animal. And she is just so excited about mules, and she just loves to tell everybody else about them. And I'm just so glad to hear about them. So, Sue, if you will come up, please.
Thank you. I'm not used to a mic. I've got a loud voice, but they say I need to use this. So
we'll see. Does that work? Okay. As she said, I am Sue Cole. I'm a senior editor. For years, I was editor of Mules and More, and 4 years ago my granddaughter graduated from college with a degree in journalism and also in graphic design, and she came back to the office and took over, and so Grandma had to have a title, so that's why I'm senior editor. But I'm really excited to be here today and see all of you here. I have magazines to pass out. If you didn't get one when you came in, we'll make sure that you get a magazine before you leave. I'm going to have to give you a little bit of background on mules before I talk about mules in Missouri. I'm not going to assume everyone here knows how you get a mule, because it probably isn't going to happen. But in order to get a mule, you breed a donkey, which is a male jack, to a female horse, and that's how you get a mule. Now, a mule is a hybrid, so they don't reproduce. So that's one of the ways you get a mule. Now I'm going to confuse you a little bit here. There's another way to get a mule. You can take a female donkey, which is a jenny, and breed her to a male jack, and you will get a henny. Now, some people say they can tell the difference between a henny and a mule, but I've ridden mules for about 40 years, and I haven't been able to tell the difference yet. Some people say the head looks a little different. Some people say the bray is a little different. But they too are hybrids and don't reproduce. So that's one of the things on how you get a mule. Another problem that we have is understanding what a donkey is. A lot of people don't understand that a donkey and a burro is the same thing. You have males and you have females, and they will breed and have more donkeys. The burro sort of got their terminology from the wild burros in the desert, and they're pretty much a small animal. You can have all sizes of donkeys. You can have 15-hand, what they call a mammoth donkey with a big bone, and you use that to raise your draft mules. You'll breed them to a Percheron, Clydesdale, this kind of mare. We prefer what is called a large standard donkey, which is a little finer boned, and when I say we, my family is all into saddle mules. We don't work mules. We don't have draft mules, we have riding mules. So then you want to take, you can take an Appaloosa mare, you can take a quarter type mare, you can have a gaited mare such as a fox trotter or a Tennessee walker, and so you can have many, many different types of mules. And there's a lot to learn about mules, and I'm certainly not going to cram all this down your throats today, but it is really interesting. I've been riding mules for about 40 years. I'm heavy, I'm short, and I couldn't get on that big old paint horse anymore, so I decided to get a mule, and I immediately fell in love. Mules are very devoted to the people that take care of them. I call them dog-like in their devotion. They really love you. Not all mules are alike. There's good mules and bad mules, but hopefully I'm going to talk about the good mules. And I'm sure some of you gentlemen are old enough that you've worked mules and you can relate to that statement. But back when my granddad worked with mules, he didn't have time to train the mules. He broke a mule. And there's a lot of difference in breaking a mule and training a mule. Usually when you break a mule, you use a little heavier hand. You don't have the patience that it takes. I had a lady call me yesterday, and she said, had I had my baby mule before I had my children, I would have been a much better mother, because they teach you patience and they teach you to be humble, and they really do. They teach you both of those things. And I as you can tell, I love my mules. My personal mule is 39 years old this year. I bought her when she was 9. She's a Palomino mule, and she's been a good friend to me on a lot of trails. And she's very healthy yet. She has to have special hay and special feed, but she has earned her keep. So they do live a long life. About 42, I think, is the oldest I've heard of a mule living. But they do have a longer life, and we sort of attribute that to the donkey and end of their life. Horses don't live that long, but it seems like donkeys live forever. And they are very personable. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I have learned about mules in Missouri. As she said, I was very instrumental in helping get the mule made the state animal. I've heard of Missouri mules all my life, and I'm sure you all have too, and we just took for granted it was the state animal. Well, several years ago, there was a gentleman from northeast Missouri contacted me and said, let's make this official. So I was able to work with them. It took us 4 years to get the mule made the state animal. But I was very instrumental. I got to testify before some committees, which was really scary. This is scary, but that was really scary, trust me, because I had never done anything like that. But it was really a learning process, and we finally made it official. And we had t-shirts made that says, "It's official, the Missouri Mule." I was very, very lucky when I got the magazine to be able to work with Dr. Melvin Bradley. He's now deceased. He was a professor at the University of Missouri, and he wrote several books. One of them is The Missouri Mule, His Origin and Times. And the title is a little misleading because he gets into a lot of information about mules, not only in Missouri. I think the most fascinating chapter to me in the whole book was how the soldiers used mules during the Burma invasion. And when the Burma invasion was over, they shot their mules. Now you may think that's very cruel, but it wasn't. That's being very kind to an animal that helped them through the war, helped them through the hard times. If they had turned the mules loose, they would have been used by the people over there. They would have been abused. They would not have been taken care of like they were used to. The government said, we can't ship them home. It costs too much money. So the soldiers, before they came home, shot their mules. And I had no idea that happened. But it did, and Dr. Bradley has a great chapter in his book. He interviewed 124 old-time mule men. And I was very fortunate. Dr. Bradley was a good friend of mine. And I was very fortunate to be able to listen to all of his interviews on tape. And he said a lot of times when he and the photographer would go in and sit down with the tape recorder, the guys would just clam up. Which, that's sort of understandable. But he did free them up and got them to talk about it. They got some great photos. Another book that he wrote is Mules in the Mines. And that's an interesting little read. Probably y'all didn't really realize that when they first started mining, they used mules in the mines. And those mules stayed down there for years and years and never got to see the daylight. So to me, that's a great read. And then this little book here is Jack Stock and Mules in Missouri. And I handed out magazines today. Some of you got magazines with a real dark cover. You think that's a good-looking mule? It's not. That's a donkey. That is a donkey. I can tell the difference between a donkey and a mule by looking at their heads. But it takes a little research. It takes a little learning to learn that there is a difference in the looks of a mule and a donkey. So, this little Jack Stock book talks about a lot of the jacks that they used back years ago to raise mules. My whole family is very, very interested in mules, so I'm going to give you a little bit of history on my son. I have a son named Lauren, and he has a son. And they do nothing. They make their living training mules. They don't break mules. They train mules. And that's all they do. During the summertime, they have a girl that helps them, and they ride 18 mules a day. During the wintertime, they still ride. If you guys have been to Cuba or Vienna to the sail barn, You've seen my son riding. He pushes cattle back there, and he uses the mules that he's training for people across the country. And it's a very good business for him. He truly, he has the same love for mules that I do. And go back and talk to him sometimes. You can catch him still long enough. But he's just like I am. He loves to talk mules. He gives clinics on mules. A couple times a year he'll give a clinic, and they ride their mules trail riding. They ride their mules. They hunt wild hogs on muleback. I've never gone along. Don't think it's anything I have any desire to do, but it's pretty hairy, I guess. But when you think about mules, you probably think, oh, I wonder what a good mule will cost these days. When you go to buy a good mule these days, you need to plan on spending at least $3,000 for something that's going to take you down the trail safely and something that looks good. Lauren takes 2 mules every year to Wyoming to a special mule sale. They have 100 head of mules. Last year, one of the mules he took brought $20,500. We had raised her. She was pretty special, and she was pretty hard to let go, but I think the dollar signs got in his eyes. But the other mule he took, I think, brought $13,000 something. So the mule market is very good if you have good mules. And there again, you want to train that mule. You don't want to break that mule. That mule, if you train her and train her right, that mule will do anything you ask of her. And when I say her, we're okay, here again, Molly mules. Does anybody know what a Molly mule is? That's a female mule. There's Molly mules and Jenny mules, and they are the females. The male mules we usually call John mules or Jack mules, and that depends on which part of the country that you're in. So we much prefer the Molly mules. They're a little more docile than the John mules are, but they won't work as hard for you either. They tend to play out a little quicker. I don't know why, but they just, maybe guys work harder than females. I don't know. We'll give them that credit anyhow. But I do love my mules. For a little bit of history on mules in Missouri, of course we have Dr. Bradley who has written some of the most popular books on mules anywhere. There are only 2 mule publications in the United States, both of them here in Missouri. Mules and More is one. There's one published at Marshfield, Missouri by the name of Western Mule. And we are the only 2 publications that have kept our heads above water for 20 years or more. So the mule market is very lucrative if you have good mules. It's sort of hard to raise a mule in the sense that when you get out there, that baby mule is the most loving thing you're ever going to be around. They're just like a puppy, but they're going to grow up. So you can't really train them like a puppy. You have to let them know who's boss. And here in Missouri, as I say, Dr. Bradley was to me, one of those most popular people. But there was an old gentleman from Mount Sterling by the name of Ben Shasheen. Has anybody heard of Ben Shasheen?
Yes, I know that.
He passed away, about 10 years ago?
Yes, he did.
And he moved to Pleasant Hill, Missouri, which is south of Kansas City. And Ben was well known, and is still well known in the mule industry for raising good jacks to raise saddle mules. The Shasheen bloodline is still out there, and I can give him credit for the good saddle mules that we have today. Another person here in Missouri that I could give a lot of credit to, or think is very popular in the mule industry, and that's Larry Gillig. His folks live down at Bay. Armin and Ann, there you go. But Larry was born and raised down there, moved to Kansas City as a veterinarian, and he decided to get in the mule business. Well, he's still in the mule business, but one of the greatest things he did was he sold a mule to West Point for a mascot. I think that's pretty cool. Not everybody can say that. So I've got to meet a lot of popular people in the mule world, and I've read a lot about them. Leroy Van Dyke, a country and western singer. He still raises mules today. When I bought the magazine, Leroy Van Dyke was the first person that I interviewed. went up and had dinner with them at a restaurant, and then we went out to their house, looked at all the mules, and then went and ate apple pie. And I'll never forget his wife's apple pie. It was great. But he does have some really nice mules, and he's still in the business. I do have to give my son credit. He is probably one of the most well-known mule trainers in the United States. He is booked up. If you have a mule you want broke or trained, it will be 2.5 years before you can take that mule to him. So a lot of people, as soon as their foals are born, he trains them. He sold mules to Germany. He shipped a pair of mules over there, and we thought that was a pretty good deal. Not everybody gets to send mules to Germany either. And right now in April, he has a lady coming over from England to buy a mule from him. So Mules and More is very well known. If you're into mules at all, you probably have heard of Mules and More magazine. And I could talk about mules all day long, but I'm not going to bore you all. I know all of you aren't interested in the heritage of the mules, but years and years ago, the draft mule was actually the mule. That was all you could find. Very seldom did you find a saddle mule on the market. Lathrop, Missouri. It's called the mule capital of the world. Now Lathrop is up north. I'm not sure just exactly where. I think it's north and east of Kansas City. But they ship mules to, and I had to look this up on the internet this morning, to the Boer, B-O-E-R, War, which was held in Africa, or which went on in Africa, and they shipped mules over there from 1899 to 1902. Now so mules for people and farmers in Missouri was really a cash market. That was a cash crop for them. And Lathrop has some of the largest mule barns, and some of them they have kept, but I have heard people talk about that they would harness up mules to take to the fields, and there would be 400 teams in the fields up there. And they said it was just awesome to listen to them, in the morning, call the mules in and get them up and get them harnessed. And I can't even imagine 400 teams of mules. That's a lot of mules. It's a lot of mule shoes. But maybe up in that country, it might have been that they didn't have to have their mules shod either. That's one of the advantages to riding mules and working mules, that if you don't live in a rocky area, you can get by without shoes. Another advantage, and probably another reason that I don't know whether old-timers is the right word or not, but people like my granddad, mules don't eat nearly as much as a horse does. So you could probably keep one mule for what it took to feed 2 horses. And they'll put out a little better day's work. The heat doesn't bother them. For instance, in New Orleans, they have the carriage rides, and they use the mules down there. And they have a law in New Orleans that you can't pull the carriages for commercial use with anything but a mule. You have to use a mule, because they can't stand the heat and humidity. The horses can't, but the mules can. So that's pretty interesting too, to think that they have that much more stamina. I've got a couple more notes here. Oh, I found this to be interesting. In 1924, mule statistics, Gasconade County had 2,440 mules. Franklin County had 4,820 mules. Franklin County's not that much larger than Gasconade County. Is it that much larger that they would have twice as many? But yeah, they had twice as many. And then Osage County had 3,110. The number of mules in Missouri in 1924 was 369,000. I have no idea what the statistics on mules are today, but I do know that we are extremely minority in the equine world. Our numbers compared to the number of horses are really, really small. I found this interesting. I forgot what magazine or what book I took it out of, but good mules fetched more than horses and were easier sold in 1924. I like the word fetched there. but I have read just about every mule book I can get my hands on. You know, if it's not a novel, if it's true facts, I've read a lot of them. Publishing the magazine has taught me so much, has brought me to close to so many friends. I have mules, friends from all over that have mules. Of course, the internet has brought us closer too, emailing and so forth. I had a friend pass away just recently, and the lady in France, I have a lady in France that writes for me all the time. She has mules, and she had heard that this friend had passed away, and she gave me a call last Sunday and told me how sorry she was. So we're a very close-knit group. We have to be, because nobody else is going to defend our mules. A lot of times when I hand somebody a mule magazine, especially if it's at a horse event, they will turn me down. They will say, no, they don't want my publication. And then a lot of times they'll take it off in the other room where nobody can see them and read it too. So we have won some people over from the horse world to the mule world, but I don't really have a lot of information on mules in Missouri. Dr. Bradley's book contains a lot of information. Oh, another thing that we did do that's historical, my daughter-in-law is a teacher. She's actually a principal now, but you know, she's like the cobbler's family. You know, they never had really good shoes to wear because the cobbler was always working for somebody else. Well, she's the same way about mules. My son trains mules, but it seems like she never got to ride the good mules. Well, she finally latched onto a mule, and this was her mule. Well, the University at Warrensburg needed a mascot. They came down and they looked at a lot of mules. So Lennis's mule, my daughter-in-law's mule, is now a mascot for the University at Warrensburg. But as I say, we really enjoyed our mules. I can't imagine my life without a mule. If something happens to my mule, I'll probably have another one in the barn right away. Even though I don't ride anymore, I still enjoy going to the barn and feeding every morning. And I think that's a lot of the enjoyment, even when you had to make your living with mules. A lot of people really enjoyed taking care of their mules. They had a lot of pride in their mules. You can see that yet by going to the state fair. They have a lot of good mules up there. I'm available to answer questions after this is over. Come up and look at the books. If anybody doesn't have a magazine, I have some more up here. We'll make sure you get one. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
Missouri and mule goes together like peaches and cream. I've never heard of a Nebraska mule or whatever. I'm sure there are some.
We are the only state animal that has.
Right. Are Missouri mules any different, any better than any other mule around? Or?
I think that terminology came back whenever they were using the mules as cash crops. They could grow mules, you know, they could raise mules, and well, a lot of the mules were shipped. They have what they call a little cotton mule, and it's a little smaller mule. They have a smaller foot, and they used them for cotton, you know, for plowing cotton or whatever you do to cotton. I'm not a farmer, but they used them in the South, so a lot of them were shipped to Tennessee and Kentucky and down in there for the cotton mules. And then, as I say, Lathrop, Missouri is the mule capital of the world, and they ship mules everywhere. So I think that's where the terminology actually came from. People came to Missouri and bought the mules. There was a lot of mules. Otto Cotwick's farm out here on the Dry Park, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. Well, Otto didn't really handle mules, but he handled jack stock, and he shipped donkeys overseas for a long time. And a lot of the people shipped, you know, they shipped them by rail, and then they would put them on a boat and send them overseas. So if you wanted a good mule, you came to Missouri, or you contacted someone in Missouri, and they found you the mules that you needed. And that's still happening today. It's amazing the people that call the office and say, I'm looking for a good mule. And we will, you know, depending on whether or not they want to travel, we will find them a mule dealer in their area. So, any other questions? Yes?
The state fair, they used to have cattle for the whole period, and they used to have mules for the whole period, and they had miniature mules, and And now you go up there and don't go up on the right day, I didn't get to see any mules. So
That's true.
I'd like to see them for the whole time period.
I don't think that will ever happen again. When we show mules at the state fair, there is no what we call payback. There's no money involved. Well, when you got a $60,000 truck and a $100,000 trailer and a $10,000 mule, you got to have a little traveling money. And that has really hurt the shows all over the country, not just here. And they are also getting away from the draft type mule at the state fair. Used to, they would have 40 and 50 teams in the arena at one time, and the draft industry in both the horse and the mule industry is really dying. There's more than one reason for that. One thing is the old timers that know how to harness can't do it anymore or don't want to do it anymore. Well, that's true. I mean, they don't want to do it. But the guys that work at a 9-to-5 job can come home and they can throw a saddle on that mule and be out of the barnyard in 15 minutes. Where if you clean up 2 mules and have to harness, you're talking, 30, 45 minutes at least. So the younger generation has gotten away from it. And then you can feed one saddle mule rather than a team much cheaper, and the economy is part of the problem. So I think that's one of the reasons that the draft industry is going downhill. But that's my personal observation. But it does make sense. But we travel, we've traveled to Bishop, California to shows. We traveled to New York to shows and all points in between. And used to, we did it for, if there wasn't any payback, it wasn't any big deal. But anymore, if there's not some gas money involved, we just don't go. It's just gotten too expensive to go. Do you have a question, ma'am?
Yeah, I do. Do the mules bray, or is that just the jacks?
No, the mules definitely bray. They do. And they're so acclimated to a time. The lady that's with me today can tell you this. If nobody's fed by 7:30 in the morning, when she drives up the driveway at 8:30, those mules are standing out there braying at her, where is my breakfast? But they do, and I love to hear the mules bray. The jacks have a different bray. It's a little coarser, a little louder than the mules are. And that's what, when I talked about hennies earlier, I think I had a henny at one time, because she had just more of a hoarse squeal bray, it was just a mixture, and her head was a little different too, shaped a little different. I can look at a mule and tell you, look at the head of a mule and tell you whether it's a jack mule or a molly mule. The John mules are much coarser than the molly mules. So, anybody else have anything? Yes? I have not. I know Jack Riddle was a great mule man. No. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I saw him. You slipped in the back door, didn't you? I would be happy for you, too.
I'm pleased you're here, Joy. Thank you very much.
Yes, he's a great mule person.
That's why I'm all timer.
You are. I have to admit, you are. And he's got a good eye for a team, too.
I got something here to prove it too. My father and Otto Smith were big mule men. And at Otto Smith's auction, I was able to purchase this calendar.
Oh, neat.
100 years old last year. And it's a pretty nice calendar. I don't remember what I had to do for it, but I'm sure it'd be worth a couple $100 now.
It's pretty priceless.
Also, this man right here, I attended his auction in Columbia, Missouri. Asbury had that auction, and I bought this picture of Kansas City Star. My father attended these auctions, and the reason I got that picture, pretty sure that he was standing right here. This is a 1938 picture. But he bought a lot of horses, quite a few mules out of Kansas City, and brought them back here. We ship them St. Louis, and like Sue told you, Dad had some to go overseas too. He actually had a hire man that went over there with him, so.
That was very common to accompany your mules overseas.
Right. Larry Speckelmeyer was his name. I'll leave these up here.
Those are neat.
Okay. Thank you, Sue.
You got anything else you want to share about your team?
Oh, Pat and Jane. Well, I was their owner of Pat and Jane, and now I'm sold to the Deerbird Foundation. They'll be at the farm there, and test it. Test it, one, two.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, like Sue said, us old timers getting too old for this hard work, and it is hard work to have draft mules, and Sue can tell you that. I sold that team to Deerbird Foundation, and they're at the farm at the present time. Now I don't know how much they're going to use them, but I'm sure they'll find somebody to work for them. We bought Pat and Jane out of Tennessee, Columbia, Tennessee, but they were originally Missouri Mules, and they'll be 16 years old this year. And they were black. Of course, did Sue tell you anything about colors?
No, I didn't. Didn't want to bore them to death.
They were born black, of course. They out of Persian mares and colored jack, or a dark colored jack, and they were born black, steel blue grays, what we call them. And about 7 or 8, they turned apple gray, and now they'll turn white. And Charlie Rose can also tell you that they'll turn white in years. And these mules have turned white at the present time. Charlie, where you at? Seen him a while ago. Anyway, his mules are white here too. How old are your mules?
No, he's
Sorry, Sly.
He went the other room.
Anyway, I think his mules are all white also. But anyway, that was a good team. Carol and I went to Columbia, Tennessee to a few of them shows and saw these mules work. And I come back and asked him one time in later years that if he'd sell those mules. And he said, Joy, he said, I think I'm done with them. I've done all I want to do with them, and I think I'll sell them. So he priced them, we bought them. He said, I'm going to break another team. About 6 months later, he called and said, his wife called and said that he had a heart attack while breaking his young team and passed away. And I'll always never forget Mr. Jones. He was a fine man and a fine mule man, and he lived in Columbia, Tennessee.
If you want to find good draft teams nowadays, you almost have to go to Kentucky or Tennessee to find them. There are people that have them now. When they're finished with them, somebody's standing there waiting for them. They're just so hard to find. And again, I attribute that to the fact that Joy won't get out there and train anymore for us.
That's the problem. Nobody's working them anymore.
That's right. My husband was the same way. He would go down to Tennessee and buy green mules and bring them home and drive them on the gravel roads for hours and hours and hours. And I mean, there was somebody standing there waiting for him when he got them ready to go.
This man spent many hours breaking this team, and they were broke the best. When he'd shear them, he wouldn't even put a halter on them. He'd say, come up Pat, come up Jane, and they'd stand right there, and he'd get on the block and shear them, and never use a halter.
Now I want you to notice something there. The whole time he talked about the teams, he talked about breaking his team. We never talk about breaking a saddle mule. We train a saddle mule.
That's an old
Yeah, that comes from the older generation.
generation.
Right.
You said you went to Tennessee and bought these Missouri mules. How did you tell they were Missouri mules?
He told me that they were born in 1999. They were born in Missouri, and he got them off Missouri. That's cool.
Some way to tell.
That's very common. They have huge draft mule sales in Tennessee, huge sales. And the people from Missouri would take their mules down there to market them. And so,
Reese Brothers out of Tennessee.
Johnny Kelso, that's another one
So
there.
you register like horses? Are you registered like horses?
They don't register the draft teams like they do the saddle mules. We have a regular saddle mule association where we register them. And, but there's really not any point in registering a mule in the sense that,
For the breeding purposes?
right, the only good thing about it, which we'd like to have them registered, is if you find a good mule, you want to know what the sire is so you can, and what the dam is, so you can find that cross again. But people just don't do it.
I made an album, you all can look at that after a while, 2007, one of all of them, and they're in here, and a few things about it if you want to look at them. I won't take any more time.
Oh, you're fine.
What's the worst story about mules you ever have? Do you have a particularly interesting story about when you first started with mules, or something you want to share with us?
Be easy on us here.
An hour or two. My father started, my grandfather, when they come to Herman in 1908. They would buy mules out of Gasconade, Franklin, and Warren counties. He had special orders for them, and like Sue told you before, he liked the cotton type mules, 14-3, 15-hand mules, and we shipped a lot of them to St. Louis, and they went overseas. But for World War II, after World War II, they used them in Spain and areas of that type to take out all the things that were left there by mule. Yeah. And this Melvin Bradley talks a lot about that in his
He does.
books.
Were you here when I talked about the vermin invasion?
I got a set of those books. Somebody like to have them for a while to read. There's a lot of interesting things in there about it.
I have a set to sell also. They're out of print, and you just can't hardly find a set.
Yeah, they're pretty hard to find.
You had like a mule hospital or horse hospital there on the farm, am I remembering that right?
Mules don't get hurt or
Oh, yeah.
sick.
When we bring them out of Kansas City, of course, they get what we call the stemper. That's like pneumonia or cold. And we would separate them and put them in a different barn so they wouldn't deal with the other mules or horses. And yeah, it was called the hospital barn. We had to tear that barn down, but it wasn't.
It's very contagious.
It is.
It's very extremely contagious.
Very contagious.
Sue or Joy, either one. What part did the mules play in World War I?
Well,
I read a little history on that this morning, more than I could really get into today. But they shipped them overseas, just like.
Did they use them like cavalry or just as pack animals or?
they use them for pack animals.
Mostly.
Melvin Bradley claims in his book that they also, some of the Germans ate them. When they come out of Missouri, especially because they were fat. And I guess that meat was more juicy, but they ate a lot of it. And he'll tell you that in his book. I hate to tell you that here today.
Well, it is true.
It is true.
I had an interesting thing happen this week through the internet. Someone emailed me and wanted to know where they could get a mule hide. And I didn't know. I told him I was sorry. You know, I wasn't, for one thing, I wasn't going to pursue it. But I just don't know, you know.
They're not going to get one off your mule.
No, they're not. That's right.
Thank you all for coming.
Even a render. A render would happen.
Probably,
What
but
they do with the animal after they,
yeah, but
and they ship that off to have it come.
right, this person was from New York. I don't know what he had in mind. Yes, ma'am.
I thought I read somewhere that mules can jump like straight up and they go hunting with them.
Right, that's the little coon hunting mule.
Yeah, they jump up on
Right.
the fences.
That used to be a really, really great sport at the shows. But there again, no one is raising that smaller mule. The smaller the mule, the higher they jump. And it is fun. There are some mules around. The first really good jumping mule I saw was at Peaceful Valley. And that was the first year I bought the magazine, and that mule is still jumping in competition at the state fair. Right, Radar is his name. Yes, sir.
You know, getting back to this white mule, is that, how do you get, isn't that done genetically and through breeding and such as that?
It is, but there is no true genetics in jack stock. The American Mule and Donkey Society has tried to get the genetics to see what crosses with this to make this, and the jack stock just won't give them a true answer. But Joy can tell you most of the time if you get, if you breed to a,
There are some albinos, there are some white.
right.
Oh, there are some white.
They'll all be white. They'll all be white. They'll never be any.
But usually your black draft type mules will usually always turn gray on you, or turn completely white.
Yes, they will.
You want to get rid of them before they get completely white. They're harder to sell then.
That's the reason I sold mine.
That's right.
No, not really.
No, I
I love
understand.
the mules, and I'm sure they got a good home, and I'll help them take care of them some.
My mule is Palomino, but she didn't come out of a Palomino mare. She came out of a bay mare.
Then that's just a happening, getting a white mule.
Well, not in the draft industry, it isn't, but now in the saddle mule industry, it pretty well is. In the saddle mule industry, the mule is the least desirable color, the white is the least desirable color.
Sure.
And I think the reason behind that is nobody wants to clean up a mule that's been rolling in the green grass or laying in the manure.
Yeah.
And if it's white, you gotta do it.
Sure.
A red sorrel is a prominent breed in draft animals. Red sorrels take more ribbons than any of them.
You're
When
right.
you go to the fair, what's left in Missouri State Fair, you'll see the sorrels, the red sorrels, more than them, I think.
Well, the blonde sorrel too, with the blonde maiden
Blonde
tail.
sorrels is good too.
And those are out of Belgian mares.
Right.
So, yes.
Do they still use mules at Grand Canyon?
Yes, ma'am. That's all that can handle the Grand Canyon. A horse every day at the Grand Canyon would not hold up.
Are they free?
Actually, they come out of, the Reese brothers from Gallatin, Tennessee provide the mules to the Grand Canyon, but Reese's also have this huge auction in Tennessee, and they buy mules that come out of Missouri.
Okay, well, thanks for your answer.
Oh, that's all right.
We do have a bunch of guys over here by Big Ridge that could hunt with jumping mules.
Yeah, but they are harder and harder to find. The smaller mule is getting harder to find. It seems like right now the hottest thing on the market is the gaited mule out of foxtrotters or walking horses. But that industry's going in cycles just like everything else. You know, at one time everybody had to have a paint, and then everybody had to have an Appaloosa. Well, in the mule industry, the foxtrotting mules are really hot item, or your good broke trail quarter type mules.
I've known Sue for a long time, and she's got one of the best son-in-laws you'll ever meet.
I've already bragged on him.
I guarantee you, is he here today?
No, he's not. He's
I guarantee you one thing, if you want to buy a mule, a saddle mule, go to Mr.
Lauren.
Lauren.
He has an ad in the magazine that you have today. No matter which issue you have, he has an ad, and it's Paradise Mules, and he's at Bell. If you ever get around Bell on Highway C, he loves to talk mules just like I do. And if he's on a tractor, be sure and stop him. If he's on a mule, you might want to hesitate.
He'll treat you fair and right.
Anything else?
Do we have some here who have stories of working mules they'd like to share from our members? Okay, I figured we did, so I wanted to pass the mic around.
My wife told me I couldn't tell this, but she's on the other end of the building. My wife also brought some pictures from my grandpa. My grandpa, Charlie Gross, he was a mule trader and a real good friend of Joy's dad. They visited back and forth and traded mules back and forth and sold mules to each other. I'm sure each one of them thought they got the best of the other one at times. And if you notice, when Joy was here, Joy was still selling mules. He was still telling about how good that team was, right? Anyhow, my grandpa kept a diary every day of what he did, what he bought, what he sold, what the weather was. So Phyllis and I, we've spent most of the 2 days looking through some of those diaries from back in the 1890s all the way up to 44 maybe. And he'd have down how many mules he bought, or where he bought them, or what he gave for them. And then you could look a few weeks later what he sold them for. They would bunch them together and take them to Berger or to Herman and ship them. Put them on a barge or on the railroad. And the only bad thing, it's kind of hard reading the writing on some of those old ledgers. But it's very interesting reading. But I guess my greatest mule story of all times, I worked with a guy and he raised a jumping mule, coon hunting mule. Rachel was talking about a coon hunting mule, and they are very hard to train. He had a lot of trouble training his. He came to work one Monday morning and he said, Charlie, he said, I had a heck of a deal over the weekend. I said, oh, what's that? And he said, well, he said, I got a spotted coon hound, and he said, I got it about a 20-foot end of chain or 25-foot end of chain, and he said, I got that dog tied on that chain to a doghouse. And he said, I feed my dog there in the dog pen, and he said, I looked out the window the other evening, and he said the mule was standing there eating that dog feed. So apparently they love dog feed. So he said, I thought, well, I'll fix this. So he said, I just took the dog pen and slid it in the doghouse. And he said the dog went in and ate the dog feed. And he said the mule stood there and watched, and he said, I thought, well, I got that whipped. So he said about 2 days later, he said, I looked out, and he said the dog was sitting there watching, and the mule was down on his front knees, and he had his head sticking in the doghouse, licking that feed out of the dog pen. So he says, I went and got the 22 with birdshot. And he said, I eased the kitchen window up. And he said, I fired that mule in the butt with that 22 birdshot. And he said, when that birdshot hit him in the butt, he said he pried that tail down so tight, he said, you couldn't have pried it up with a crowbar. And he said, about that time, he said he stood up and he had that doghouse on his head and shoulders. And he said, down through the woods he went with a doghouse on his head and shoulders. And he said, old Spot sitting there watching. He said, when that slack went out the end of that chain, he said it jerked old Spot's neck. And he said, old Spot, he took out and he was following. And he said he was trying to get between the same trees the mule was. And he said, I tell you, I never heard a mule talk, but he said, I swear that old mule was going, help, help, help. That is a true story.
Arlen, did you have a story? Is it on?
No, I'm not going to tell it on Joy. I'm going to tell it on his dad. I don't know how old I was, but I guess I was seven or eight, I guess. And I was plowing, cultivating corn along the county road. And we it was a single row cultivator. It was a horse pulling it and a mule pulling it. And the mule buyer came by. And that was Bill Kalmar, Joy's dad. And he's buying mules. And my dad, he asked whether that mule I was cultivating corn with was broke. And Dad really didn't like him. He says, well, you see that little boy out there driving them, so he must be doing all right. Well, you had to break that mule every morning when you picked him up. I don't know whether he told the mule to Bill Kalmar or not, but that is my first recollection of of mules and the Kalmars in their mule ride.
I was about the same age as Arlen, and we're about the same age. 1937 and 38. We had a farm in Berger Bottom, and we had 2 riding cultivators, and Dad had sent us down in Berger Bottom. Somebody took us down there, and he'd leave us with them mules all day long. They'd bring us some food and water and everything, but about the time we get them mules where they would drive good and behave good and walk them corn rows, Dad come along with a buyer to sell them. Break another team. That's exactly what it was. Them were the days.
I have one story I can tell about my mule days. I'm going to back up here. My dad owned cross-country trail rides at Eminence for 21 years. So I rode a lot of horses down there. Well, when I decided to get my first mule, I wanted to go to somebody that I thought would treat me right and be honest. So we had a fella that led the mule ride every day. They had a special ride just made up of mules. So I went to Ray and I asked him, can you shoe this mule? Can you load this mule? Will this mule buck? And all this stuff. And I knew this mule that he'd been riding, and his name was old JC. And I asked all the right questions. Well, I got home, and my husband and I saddled up one day, and the wind was blowing a little bit, and we headed to town, and old JC ran off with me. I mean, literally ran off with me. And I went home, and I called Ray, and I said, Ray, JC ran off with me. And he said, oh yeah, you run off with you. So you gotta ask all the right questions. I didn't ride JC anymore. My husband took him. Well, if we don't have anything else, I'm going to close, and I'll be up here for a little while if y'all want to come up.